He left her when she told him about the pregnancy, thinking she'd never succeed, but watching her receive the highest military honors while 3 identical girls in white gowns called her Mommy, tears of regret filled his eyes. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The rain lashed against the windows of the small Boston apartment, each drop like a tiny drumbeat announcing the storm brewing both outside and within. Jasmine Williams stood frozen in the bathroom, staring at the plastic stick in her trembling hands. The 2 pink lines were unmistakable, as definitive as military orders. "Positive," she whispered to the empty bathroom. At 23, Second Lieutenant Jasmine Williams had planned her life with military precision. Graduate from officer training with honors. Complete her political science degree with distinction. Rise through Army ranks while serving her country. Fall in love with a brilliant man who respected her ambitions. Have children, eventually, when the timing was right. The plastic test trembled in her hands. The timing was decidedly not right. Jasmine closed her eyes, mentally calculating dates. She was only 2 months into her new posting. Her thesis on emerging geopolitical threats was due in 6 weeks. And Marcus was on the verge of something big with Blackstone. Marcus Fitzgerald. The name conjured the image that had first caught her attention 2 years ago in Harvard's Widener Library. She'd been researching NATO expansion when she noticed him. Tall, impeccably dressed, amber eyes focused intensely on financial projections spread across his table. Unlike the other business students with their performative confidence, his concentration had an authentic quality that drew her in. "Excuse me," she'd said, pointing to a financial journal beside his elbow. "Are you using that?" He'd looked up, taking in her military posture and practical hairstyle with intelligent eyes. "I am, but I'm willing to share if you're willing to discuss why a soldier needs the International Banking Review." 2 coffees later, she'd discovered his brilliant mind matched his striking appearance. The son of Chicago real estate royalty, Marcus had already mapped his ascent through the financial world with a confidence that bordered on certainty. His MBA was nearly complete, and top investment firms were already courting him. Now, 2 years later, Jasmine placed the pregnancy test on the bathroom counter and splashed cold water on her face. They'd been careful. They'd used protection. But statistics and probability were merciless teachers. Someone always fell into that small percentage of failure. Jasmine straightened her shoulders and looked at her reflection. "Pull yourself together, soldier," she muttered. Marcus would be home in an hour. They would face this together, develop a strategy, adapt their plans. She moved through their modest apartment with purpose, straightening the stacks of military strategy books that shared shelf space with his financial reports. She set the small dining table with careful precision, the decent plates, the wine glasses they'd splurged on last Christmas. The apartment wasn't much, but they'd made it home while she completed her assignment in Boston and he finished at Harvard. Her hands moved mechanically through the preparation of a simple dinner. Pasta, his favorite. She rehearsed different ways to share the news, discarding approaches that sounded too emotional, too clinical, too apologetic. "We're going to have a baby, Marcus." Too abrupt. "I know this isn't in our immediate plans, but..." Too defensive. "I'm pregnant, and I think we can make this work." That sounded right, acknowledging reality while projecting confidence. The key turned in the lock at precisely 6:15. Marcus was nothing if not punctual. He entered with his usual energy, his tailored suit still crisp despite the long day, his leather briefcase gleaming with the promise of success. "You wouldn't believe the day I've had," he announced, kissing her distractedly. "Bradley called from Blackstone. They're moving up my final interview to next Tuesday. The executive director will be there." His amber eyes shone with excitement. "This is it, Jas. Everything I've been working for." Jasmine forced a smile. "That's wonderful. I made your favorite." "You're an angel." He loosened his tie and set his briefcase carefully on his desk. But I can only stay for a quick bite. Henderson sent over some prospectus documents I need to review before tomorrow. They sat at the small table, Marcus talking animatedly about Blackstone's Asian expansion and his ideas for emerging market investments. Jasmine nodded at appropriate intervals, searching for an opening in the conversation. His enthusiasm made the news perched on her tongue feel like a grenade with the pin half pulled. "So that's the plan," Marcus concluded, twirling pasta onto his fork. "If I nail this interview, we're looking at base compensation of $200,000 plus bonuses. By 30, I could be making 7 figures. He reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "And then you can finish your degree without worrying about money, maybe even transition to diplomatic corps like you've talked about." Jasmine set down her fork. This was the moment. "Marcus, I need to tell you something important." He paused, fork halfway to his mouth, something in her tone finally breaking through his excitement. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus's hand froze. For one terrible moment, his face was completely unreadable, a blank canvas before the first stroke of paint. Then his expression shifted. Not to joy, not to shock. His features hardened into something cold and calculating, the face he wore when analyzing failing investments. "You're sure?" His voice was flat. "I took 2 tests, both positive." Marcus set down his fork with deliberate care. He studied her face as if seeing her for the first time, his gaze clinical. "How did this happen?" "We were careful. Protection isn't 100% effective. You know that." Marcus pushed his plate away and stood, pacing the small living area. His movements were controlled, but Jasmine recognized the tension in his shoulders, the same tension he carried during finals week. "This can't be happening now," he said finally. "The timing couldn't be worse." "I know it's not ideal." "Not ideal?" He cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Jasmine, I'm about to get the offer that will define my entire career trajectory. Blackstone is the golden ticket. Everyone at Harvard would kill for this position." "We can make it work," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We'll adjust our timeline." Marcus ran his hands through his perfectly cut hair, mussing the careful styling. "You don't understand what's at stake. This is everything I've worked for since I was 18. Blackstone partners make more in bonuses than most people see in a lifetime." "I'm not asking you to give up your career," Jasmine said, rising to face him. "I'm saying we're going to have a child. Our child. We need to figure this out together." Marcus moved to the closet and pulled out a sleek black suitcase. With methodical precision, he began removing his clothes from the dresser. "What are you doing?" Jasmine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Being realistic," he said without looking at her. "This doesn't work for me, Jasmine. A baby now would destroy everything I've built. We're talking about our family, Marcus. Our child." Jasmine instinctively placed her hand on her still flat stomach. Marcus zipped the suitcase with a decisive click. When he finally turned to face her, his expression made her blood run cold. "A family." His laugh was hollow. "Let's be honest with ourselves. This was never going to be forever. You're a military officer with a modest paycheck and outsized ambitions. I'm about to become one of the youngest vice presidents at the most prestigious investment firm in the world." Jasmine felt as if she'd been slapped. "How can you say that? We've been together for 2 years. We've talked about a future. 2 years that frankly have been a detour from my path." His voice was clinically detached, as if discussing a particularly disappointing investment. "You're smart, Jasmine, but let's not pretend you're part of my world. You'll never be accepted in the circles I need to move in." The cruelty of his words stole her breath. "I don't understand. Last month you said you loved me." "I was fond of you. There's a difference." Marcus checked his watch impatiently. "You're not sufficiently important to sacrifice my future for. You never will be." Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "This is your child too. No. Marcus grabbed his coat from the rack. This is a mistake that I'm choosing not to participate in. You can deal with it however you want, but don't involve me. Marcus, please. You're a burden I can't afford, Jasmine, and that child would be just another mistake in my life. He opened the door, pausing only briefly. Take care of it or take care of it yourself. Either way, I'm done. The door slammed with finality, the sound echoing through the apartment that suddenly felt vast and empty. Jasmine stood frozen, listening to his footsteps descending the stairs, each one driving the reality deeper into her consciousness. Only when the sound completely faded did she allow herself to collapse onto the floor, sobs racking her body as she curled protectively around her midsection. The following weeks passed in a blur of unanswered messages and unreturned calls. Jasmine vacillated between disbelief, rage, and a bone-deep sadness that threatened to consume her. She sent texts that grew increasingly desperate. Each one showed as delivered, but never read. 2 weeks after Marcus walked out, her phone was disconnected. When she called from a base phone, an automated message informed her that the number was no longer in service. 3 weeks after, a formal letter arrived from Preston and Whitfield, attorneys at law. The language was coldly professional, offering a settlement of $5,000 for medical expenses in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement and releasing Marcus Fitzgerald from all parental obligations and contact. Jasmine tore the letter to shreds, then sent a terse email to the law firm. I don't want his money. I want him to acknowledge his child. The response came the next day, more threatening in tone. The Fitzgerald family had significant resources and connections that could make her military career problematic. It would be unfortunate if her commanding officers received information about her emotional instability. The implication was clear: take the money and disappear, or face consequences. Jasmine deleted the email but saved a screenshot. She wouldn't be intimidated, but she wasn't naive about the power of wealthy families to cause problems. As her pregnancy began to show, the glances around the military academy transformed from curious to judgmental. Female officers with children weren't uncommon in the modern army, but unmarried pregnant officers still raised eyebrows, especially among the old guard. Her commander, Major Patterson, called her into his office as she entered her 4th month. He was technically supportive but painfully direct. Williams, you know I value your contributions. Your strategic thinking is some of the best I've seen in a junior officer, but I need to be frank with you. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Female officers who are single mothers rarely make it to the top ranks. The demands are incompatible with raising children alone. You might want to consider an extended leave, perhaps even a transition to civilian work. With respect, sir, I intend to continue my service and my education, Jasmine replied, her back ramrod straight despite the morning sickness that had plagued her for weeks. Patterson sighed. Think about your future, Williams. The military isn't forgiving of personal complications. When her apartment lease came up for renewal, the landlord informed her he had other plans for the unit. Despite her perfect payment history, she was given 30 days to vacate. The timing couldn't have been worse. Her growing belly made finding new accommodations surprisingly difficult. Sorry, one property manager said with a transparently fake smile. We're looking for more stable tenants. Jasmine sold her laptop first, then her modest jewelry, and finally, with tears she couldn't suppress, the honor medal that had been her father's. The money paid for prenatal vitamins and doctor's visits that her military insurance partially covered but couldn't fully address due to her high-risk status. She found night work at a call center, answering customer service calls while studying between calls, refusing to abandon her education despite the exhaustion that plagued her constantly. At her 12-week ultrasound, the technician's eyes widened. Lieutenant Williams, are you sitting down? I'm seeing 3 distinct heartbeats. 3? Jasmine repeated numbly. Congratulations, you're having triplets. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. 3 babies, 3 mouths to feed, 3 college educations to somehow provide 3 lives depending entirely on her. That night, after being turned away from an overcrowded shelter for military families in transition, Jasmine sat on a park bench, her few possessions in a duffel bag beside her. The October chill penetrated her inadequate jacket. She placed her hand on her growing belly and felt a flutter in response, the first tangible movement of her children. "I promise you," she whispered to her unborn daughters, her voice steady despite everything, "I will transform every no I've heard into a yes for you. I will prove him wrong. About me, about you, about everything." The next morning, Jasmine reported to the military recruitment office with a plan. She negotiated an administrative position that would accommodate her pregnancy while maintaining her military status. She contacted a support program for military women, securing temporary housing. When a senior officer suggested she consider adoption, Jasmine looked directly into his eyes and responded, "Sir, with all due respect, I am about to raise future American leaders." Jasmine couldn't possibly know that 14 years later, when Marcus's lawyer offered her that humiliating check, she would be commanding a military budget larger than the entire Fitzgerald family fortune. Jasmine couldn't possibly know that 14 years later, when Marcus's lawyer offered her that humiliating check, she would be commanding a military budget larger than the entire Fitzgerald family fortune. But first, she had to survive. The January wind cut through Jasmine's military-issue jacket as she trudged through the snow toward the temporary housing unit. Her pregnancy had advanced to 16 weeks, and the small bump now strained against her uniform, a visible reminder of her changed circumstances. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just from physical exhaustion but from the weight of whispers that followed her through the corridors of the base. "Did you hear about Lieutenant Williams?" The words weren't meant for her ears, but they reached her anyway, carried on the winter air. Pregnant with triplets, and the fathers nowhere to be found. Jasmine kept her chin high, her military bearing intact despite the nausea that had become her constant companion. She had learned to ignore the stares, the sudden silences when she entered a room, the pitying glances from women, and the judgmental ones from men. Her commander's words echoed in her mind. "Officials female grávidas e solteiras raramente chegam ao topo, Williams." The doubt in his voice had cut deeper than any reprimand. Even those who claimed to support her couldn't hide their skepticism about her future. The tiny room in the military family crisis housing was barely large enough for a bed and desk, let alone the 3 cribs she would soon need. Jasmine set down her heavy backpack filled with textbooks and prenatal vitamins. Today's mail included another notice. Her request for extended military housing had been under review for 6 weeks now. The bureaucratic language barely disguised the message. They were hoping she would resign her commission and disappear. "I will not disappear," she whispered to the empty room, a mantra she had adopted since Marcus walked out. She placed her hand on her growing belly. "We will not disappear." The next morning, Jasmine stood at attention before her commanding officer, her uniform meticulously pressed despite having washed it in the communal sink the night before. "Lieutenant Williams," Colonel Hartman sighed, not bothering to hide his discomfort as his eyes flickered to her midsection. "Your performance reviews remain exemplary, but your condition presents a challenge for field training." "Sir, I have adapted my physical regimen according to military guidelines for pregnant officers," Jasmine responded, her voice steady. "My academic performance remains in the top 5%. This isn't about regulations, Williams. It's about practicality." He slid a folder across the desk. "I'm recommending you for administrative transfer. There's an opening in supplies management." Supplies management, the military equivalent of being put out to pasture. Jasmine felt heat rising in her cheeks but maintained her composure. "With respect, sir, my expertise is in strategic operations, not inventory control." "Your expertise isn't the issue." His tone made it clear the conversation was over. Report to Lieutenant Colonel Morris on Monday. Dismissed. That evening, Jasmine sat on her narrow bed, laptop balanced on her knees, scrolling through apartment listings she couldn't afford. The cheapest one-bedroom was twice her housing allowance, and none would accommodate 3 infants. Her savings, once earmarked for advanced degree courses, had dwindled to almost nothing. A sharp knock on her door interrupted her calculations. "Eviction notice," announced the housing officer without preamble, handing her an official-looking document. "This temporary housing is limited to 60 days. Your time's up next week. But my extension request, denied." The woman's face softened slightly. "Look, I've got a list of shelters. Some of them take pregnant women." Jasmine took the paper with numb fingers. Shelters. She had gone from rising military officer with a promising future to homeless and pregnant in less than 3 months. That night, she sold her grandfather's watch, the last family heirloom she possessed, to an online pawn shop. The money would cover a month's rent somewhere if she could find a landlord willing to take a chance on her. The following week, Jasmine sat in the sterile waiting room of the military medical center, waiting for her next prenatal checkup. Her new position in supplies management left her with paper cuts and headaches from fluorescent lighting, a far cry from the strategic planning she had excelled at. "Williams?" The ultrasound technician, a civilian with kind eyes, ushered her into the examination room. "How are we feeling today?" "We're managing," Jasmine replied, the collective pronoun no longer feeling strange on her tongue. As the cold gel spread across her expanding belly, Jasmine fixed her eyes on the ceiling tiles, counting them as she had counted the days since Marcus left, 97, each one a small victory of survival. "Oh!" The technician's exclamation drew Jasmine's attention to the monitor. "Look at that! They're quite active today." On the grainy screen, 3 distinct shapes moved within her. Tiny hands, miniature feet, the curve of 3 spines. Reality crashed over Jasmine with new force. These weren't abstract concepts or medical diagnoses. These were her daughters. "Do you want to know the genders?" the technician asked. Jasmine nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in her throat. "All girls. 3 little ladies." The technician smiled. "Identical, from what I can tell. They've split from the same egg. That's quite rare for spontaneous triplets. 3 daughters, 3 versions of herself, perhaps. Or 3 reminders of Marcus, with his amber eyes and quick mind." Jasmine wasn't sure which possibility terrified her more. Outside the medical center, reality reasserted itself. Her phone displayed 3 missed calls from prospective landlords, all rejecting her application. Too high risk, they said. No stable income, no guarantor. Jasmine walked to the nearest park and sat heavily on a bench, calculating and recalculating her options. Her military salary barely covered essentials. Childcare for 3 infants would cost more than she earned. Her parents were dead, her extended family scattered and distant. "Excuse me." An elderly woman sat beside her, offering a sympathetic smile. "You look like you could use this." She extended a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Jasmine wanted to refuse out of pride, but hunger won. "Thank you. I volunteered at a women's shelter for 30 years, the woman explained. "I recognized the look of someone trying to solve impossible equations." "Is it that obvious?" Jasmine asked, unwrapping the sandwich with grateful hands. "Only to those who've been there." The woman nodded toward Jasmine's belly. "How far along?" 18 weeks. Triplets." The woman's eyebrows rose. "Lord have mercy. You're carrying quite a load in more ways than one, I suspect." Something about the woman's matter-of-fact kindness broke through Jasmine's carefully constructed walls. Before she could stop herself, the story poured out. Marcus's abandonment, the military's thinly veiled disappointment, the looming homelessness. "I had a plan," Jasmine concluded, angry at the tears that threatened. "I was going to be a strategic operations officer. I was going to make a difference. Now I'm just a statistic." The old woman was quiet for a long moment. "My dear, Plans change, but purpose doesn't have to. She reached into her bag and extracted a worn business card. Martha Washington House. It's a program for female veterans and military personnel in transition. They might have space. That evening, Jasmine stood outside a modest brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, clutching her duffel bag and the business card. The sign was discreet. Martha Washington Foundation, serving those who serve. The woman who answered the door wore a faded army t-shirt and had the direct gaze of someone who had seen combat. "Lieutenant Williams?" She extended her hand. "Sergeant Major Coleman, retired. We've been expecting you." The interior was simple but clean, with motivational posters featuring female military leaders on the walls. A dozen women in various stages of pregnancy or with small children moved through the common areas with purpose. "We have 23 residents currently," Coleman explained, leading Jasmine to a small but private room. All military, all in transition, some escaping domestic violence, others navigating service-related issues. She gestured to the twin bed and desk. "It's not the Ritz, but it's safe." "I can't afford much," Jasmine admitted. "Income-based sliding scale. We'll work it out." Coleman's expression softened. "You're not the first officer to find herself in difficult circumstances, Lieutenant. You won't be the last." That night, in the narrow bed at Martha Washington House, Jasmine fell into the first truly restful sleep she'd had in months. The knowledge that she wasn't alone in her struggle provided a comfort she hadn't known she needed. The next morning, she reported to her new position in supplies management, ignoring the curious glances at her growing belly. During her lunch break, instead of eating, she visited the base's education office. "I need to continue my degree," she told the education counselor, "even with limited time and resources." The counselor looked doubtful. "Lieutenant, most officers in your situation take a break from education." "I'm not most officers." Jasmine placed her transcript on the desk. "I need 18 more credits for my master's in strategic studies. What are my options?" By the end of the day, she had enrolled in 2 online courses and arranged a weekend independent study. Her evenings would be consumed with coursework, but education was non-negotiable. Without it, her career would stagnate permanently. 2 weeks later, Jasmine secured a night position at a call center to supplement her military salary. From 6 in the evening until midnight, she answered customer service calls for a credit card company, studying between calls and developing a remarkable ability to function on minimal sleep. Her life settled into a punishing routine. Military duties from 7 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, dinner and a short rest at Martha Washington House, call center work from 6 to midnight, then 2 hours of coursework before collapsing into bed at 2 in the morning. 5 hours later, the cycle began again. One particularly cold night, returning to Martha Washington House after her call center shift, Jasmine found herself too exhausted to climb the steps. She sat heavily on the front stoop, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. 24 weeks pregnant with triplets, working 2 jobs, pursuing a graduate degree, the impossibility of her situation crashed over her. As if sensing her despair, one of the babies, perhaps Alexis, the one the ultrasound technician had labeled Baby A, delivered a solid kick to her ribs. Then another from the right side, Madison, Baby C, the smallest but apparently the most active. Finally, a gentle rolling motion in the center, Zoe, Baby B, positioned between her sisters. Jasmine placed her hands on the distinct movements. "I hear you," she whispered. "You're right. No time for self-pity." Standing with effort, she climbed the steps, her resolve reinforced. In the small room she now called home, she opened her laptop and began researching military regulations regarding parental leave, childcare options, and career advancement for officers with dependents. If the system wasn't designed for someone like her, she would find the loopholes, the exceptions, the paths others had overlooked. She would create a strategy for this battle just as she would for any military operation. "I promise you," she told her daughters as she finally lay down to sleep, her hand resting protectively over them. that I will transform every no I've heard into a yes for you. I will prove him wrong. About me, about you, about everything." Observing her 3 daughters giving their first uncertain steps, Jasmine had no way of knowing that years later, the same determination would lead her to climb the Pentagon steps as the youngest colonel of her generation. Observing her 3 daughters giving their first uncertain steps, Jasmine had no way of knowing that years later, the same determination would lead her to climb the Pentagon steps as the youngest colonel of her generation. But first, she had to bring them safely into the world. By her 7th month, Jasmine had established a precarious routine at Martha Washington House. Her uniform had been modified extensively to accommodate her growing belly, which now preceded her into every room. The military had reluctantly kept her on active duty, though her role had been reduced to administrative tasks that felt far beneath her capabilities. Each morning began at 5, giving her time to review materials for her online courses before reporting for duty. The other women at the shelter had formed a protective circle around her, offering advice and hand-me-down baby items that Jasmine accepted with a mixture of gratitude and determination to someday repay their kindness. "You should be on bed rest with Triplets," remarked Sergeant Coleman one evening, watching Jasmine sort through a pile of donated onesies, not working 2 jobs and taking classes. Jasmine folded a tiny pink garment with military precision. "Bed rest is a luxury I can't afford, ma'am." "At least tell me you'll take the weekend off. You look exhausted." Jasmine shook her head. "I've been selected for the Special Leadership Assessment Program this weekend. It's a significant opportunity." Coleman's eyebrows shot up. "You're 30 weeks pregnant with triplets and planning to participate in field exercises?" "Modified participation," Jasmine clarified. "I'll observe the tactical portions and participate in the strategic planning sessions." "The brass is testing you," Coleman warned, "seeing if you'll break." Jasmine placed a protective hand on her belly, feeling the now familiar pattern of movement: Alexis's strong kicks, Madison's restless fluttering, Zoe's gentle rolling. "Then I'll have to disappoint them." Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for April. The Special Leadership Assessment Program gathered 20 promising junior officers at the training grounds outside Boston. Jasmine was the only woman present, and certainly the only heavily pregnant participant. The looks she received ranged from curiosity to outright disapproval. Major Reynolds, the program leader, approached her as the officers assembled. "Lieutenant Williams, are you sure you should be here?" His concern seemed genuine, if condescending. "Yes, sir. My doctor has cleared me for limited activity." Reynolds looked skeptical but nodded. "You'll observe the physical components from the command tent. I expect full participation in the strategic exercises." The morning passed with Jasmine watching from the sidelines as her colleagues navigated obstacle courses and tactical challenges. She used the time productively, analyzing their approaches and noting leadership styles. By lunchtime, she had compiled mental dossiers on each officer, who led naturally, who followed competently, who cracked under pressure. After a sparse meal of field rations, the officers gathered in the command tent for the strategic portion of the assessment. Maps were spread across tables with various scenarios outlined for analysis. "Lieutenant Williams," Major Reynolds called out, "since you've had the advantage of observation this morning, why don't you lead the first scenario planning?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Several officers smirked, clearly expecting her to falter. Jasmine rose carefully, making her way to the central table where a map of fictional territory was displayed. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." For 40 minutes, she directed a complex simulated operation, assigning roles based on the strengths she had observed earlier. Her analysis was precise, her contingency planning thorough. Even officers who had initially dismissed her began to engage seriously with her strategy. Major Reynolds watched with growing respect. "Impressive work, Lieutenant. Your tactical thinking is—" A sharp pain cut through Jasmine's abdomen, stealing her breath mid-briefing. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to maintain her composure. "Lieutenant?" Reynolds stepped forward, concerned. "I'm fine, sir. Just a practice contraction." Jasmine straightened, determined to continue, but the next pain came faster and harder, doubling her over. A warm rush of fluid down her legs confirmed what she had tried to deny. "My water just broke," she admitted, the soldier in her reporting the situation with clinical detachment even as fear gripped her heart. "I'm in labor." The command tent erupted in controlled chaos. Officers who had kept their distance all day suddenly clustered around her, offering support. "Call an ambulance!" Major Reynolds ordered, helping Jasmine to a chair. Lieutenant Park, a combat medic, kneeled beside her. "How far apart are the contractions, Lieutenant?" "About 4 minutes," Jasmine managed between careful breaths. "But it's too early. I'm only 30 weeks." Outside, the unseasonable warmth had transformed into a spring storm. Thunder rolled across the sky as rain began pelting the tent. Captain Rodriguez returned from the communications tent, his expression grim. "Sir, the storm has flooded the access road. Emergency services can't get through for at least 2 hours." "The babies won't wait that long," Jasmine said, another contraction gripping her. Major Reynolds made a swift decision. "Park, you have medical training. Rodriguez, find whatever supplies we have in the medical kit. Williams needs to be moved to the infirmary tent." 4 officers carefully lifted Jasmine's chair, carrying her through the downpour to the larger, better-equipped infirmary tent. Lightning illuminated their path in stark flashes, thunder punctuating Jasmine's increasingly frequent contractions. Inside the infirmary, Lieutenant Park quickly assessed the situation. "These babies are coming now. We need clean towels, hot water, and the emergency medical kit." Officers who had barely acknowledged Jasmine hours earlier now moved with coordinated purpose, transforming the tactical field infirmary into a makeshift delivery room. Major Reynolds contacted the base hospital via satellite phone, connecting Park with an obstetrician who provided rapid guidance. "Lieutenant Williams," Park said, his voice calm despite the pressure, "I know this isn't ideal, but we're going to deliver these babies together. The doctor is on the line to talk us through it." Jasmine nodded, fear and determination warring within her. "I trust you, Lieutenant." The next 2 hours were a blur of pain and focused effort. The storm raged outside, occasionally causing the lights to flicker. When the pain became unbearable, someone offered a leather belt to bite down on. "I can see the first head," Park announced as lightning cracked overhead, momentarily illuminating the tent in brilliant white light. Jasmine gathered her remaining strength, pushing when instructed. A thin cry pierced the air, coinciding with a deafening clap of thunder. "It's a girl," Park announced, quickly wrapping the tiny infant in a clean uniform jacket. Small, but breathing well. Alexis, named for Jasmine's father, Alexander, had arrived first, just as she had made her presence known first in the womb. She was quickly placed in the care of Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had revealed unexpected skill with newborns. The second delivery came faster. Zoe emerged quietly, her tiny body requiring gentle stimulation before she produced a soft, indignant cry. Named for Jasmine's philosophy professor who had encouraged her strategic thinking, she seemed contemplative even in her first moments. Madison arrived last, the smallest of the 3 but with surprisingly strong lungs. Her determined cries echoed her mother's spirit, earning her the name of Jasmine's most resilient childhood friend. As the final stages of labor concluded, the storm began to subside. Sunlight broke through the clouds just as emergency medical personnel finally arrived, finding an exhausted but stable new mother and 3 tiny infants wrapped in improvised military blankets. "You did it, Lieutenant," Major Reynolds said, genuine admiration in his voice. "That was the most impressive display of courage I've seen in 20 years of service." 2 days later, Jasmine sat in her hospital room, watching her daughters in their incubators. So small, so fragile, each weighing less than 3 pounds, yet fighting with a determination that matched her own. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Despite their early arrival, the triplets were showing remarkable resilience. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Major Reynolds entered carrying a small bouquet of flowers. "Lieutenant Williams," he said, setting the flowers on the bedside table. "How are our newest recruits doing?" Jasmine smiled tiredly. "Fighting the good fight, sir. The doctors say they'll need to stay in the NICU for at least a month, but their vitals are strong." Reynolds nodded, his expression unusually respectful. "Williams, what you demonstrated out there, not just during the delivery, but in the command exercises before, showed more leadership potential than most officers display in years of service." "Thank you, sir." He hesitated, then continued. "I've spoken with Colonel Hartman. We're recommending you for the Advanced Strategic Operations course once you're cleared for duty. Your talents are wasted in supply management." Jasmine's eyes widened. The Advanced Strategic Operations course was typically reserved for officers on the fast track to command positions. "I appreciate the opportunity, sir." After Reynolds departed, a nurse entered with an envelope. "This was left for you at the front desk, Lieutenant." Alone again, Jasmine opened the unmarked envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Wall Street Journal. Marcus Fitzgerald, named vice president at Blackstone, youngest in firm's history. The photograph showed Marcus in an expensive suit, confident smile firmly in place as he stood on the trading floor. There was no note, no indication of who had sent it. But the message was clear. While she lay in a hospital bed with 3 premature infants, Marcus was ascending to the heights of financial power, unburdened by responsibility. Jasmine studied his face in the photograph. The same amber eyes that might soon look out from her daughters' faces. The same confident smile that had once made her believe in their shared future. She didn't tear up the clipping or throw it away. Instead, she carefully folded it and placed it in the small journal she had started keeping for her daughters, a record of their journey together. "One day," she whispered to the 3 tiny forms in their incubators, "he will know what he missed." In the quiet hospital room, looking at her 3 daughters so small and fragile in their incubators, Jasmine couldn't imagine that in just 14 years they would be at the center of attention in Washington, making a billionaire man tremble with their mere presence. In the quiet hospital room, looking at her 3 daughters so small and fragile in their incubators, Jasmine couldn't imagine that in just 14 years they would be at the center of attention in Washington, making a billionaire man tremble with their mere presence. The next 2 years tested every ounce of Jasmine's resolve. After 37 days in the NICU, the triplets were finally discharged, weighing just over 4 pounds each. Martha Washington House had prepared a small room for them, with 3 donated cribs squeezed into a space barely large enough for one. The other residents had collected essentials, diapers, formula, and tiny clothes that still engulfed the girls' fragile frames. "I don't know how to thank you all," Jasmine said, overwhelmed by their generosity as she settled Alexis into her crib. Sergeant Coleman shook her head. "Just succeed, Lieutenant. That's all the thanks we need." Success seemed an impossible dream during those first months. Jasmine's days dissolved into an endless cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and brief moments of sleep snatched between the baby's needs. Military regulations granted her 12 weeks of maternity leave, woefully inadequate for recovering from a triplet birth while establishing care routines for 3 premature infants. On a particularly brutal night, with all 3 girls crying simultaneously, Jasmine found herself on the floor between their cribs, tears streaming down her face. Madison had colic, Alexis was teething early, and Zoe refused her formula. Jasmine had slept perhaps 2 hours in the past 24. "I can't do this," she whispered into the darkness. The admission felt like surrender. A soft knock interrupted her moment of despair. Coleman entered without waiting for permission, taking in the scene with practiced eyes. "Up you go, Lieutenant," she said, helping Jasmine to her feet. "You take Madison and Walker for the colic. I'll handle the other 2 for an hour. Then you'll sleep while I watch them." "I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask. I offered. That's what we do here." Coleman's expression softened. "No one can do this alone, Williams. Not even you." That night marked a turning point. Jasmine learned to accept help from Coleman, from other residents, from a network of military spouses who organized a rotation of assistants. The strategic thinker in her developed systems, color-coded bottles for each baby, a precise schedule posted on the wall, military-grade efficiency applied to the chaos of infant care. By the time the girls were 6 months old, Jasmine had returned to active duty, though her assignments remained administrative. Each morning, she rose at 4:30 to prepare 3 bottles while reviewing reports for work. The triplets now shared a synchronized schedule, a triumph of logistics that allowed her precious minutes for her own tasks. "Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell," she recited while changing diapers in assembly line fashion, simultaneously memorizing material for her online courses. The central strategic tenet of Clausewitz states that war is a continuation of politics by other means. Despite the exhaustion etched into her face, Jasmine maintained perfect scores in her classes. Her commanders noted her determination with grudging respect. Major Reynolds, true to his word, had recommended her for the Advanced Strategic Operations course, scheduled to begin when the girls turned 2. At night, after the babies finally slept, Jasmine worked her second job at the call center, a headset allowing her to move quietly around the tiny room, folding laundry and preparing for the next day while answering customer inquiries. 3 hours of sleep became her norm, supplemented by catnaps whenever possible. The triplets grew from fragile newborns into curious infants. Their personalities emerged clearly. Alexis, the natural leader, always first to attempt new skills. Zoe, thoughtful and observant, watching her sisters before making her own careful attempts. Madison, the determined problem solver, finding unconventional approaches to every challenge. As their first birthday approached, Jasmine received an unexpected opportunity. "Lieutenant Williams," her commander announced during their weekly briefing, "you've been selected for the NATO Joint Training Mission in Brussels. 2 weeks of intensive strategic exercises with Allied forces." Jasmine's heart raced. This was the kind of assignment that could accelerate her career, precisely what she needed to move beyond the administrative roles she'd been confined to. Then reality crashed in. "Sir, I appreciate the opportunity, but my daughter's—" "Arrangements can be made," he interrupted. "This is a significant opening, Williams. Officers compete for years for this kind of visibility." That evening, Jasmine sat across from Mrs. Patel, a retired Army nurse who occasionally helped with the triplets. "2 weeks is a long time," Mrs. Patel said, concern evident in her voice. "They're still so young." "I know," Jasmine admitted, watching the girls play on their blanket. Madison was methodically dismantling a stacking toy, while Alexis attempted to rebuild it and Zoe observed the process with solemn attention. "But this mission could change everything for us. It's the first real opportunity I've had since they were born." "They won't understand why you're gone." The words cut deeply. Jasmine knelt beside her daughters, gathering them close. Their small hands patted her face, recognizing the mother who had been their entire world for 12 months. "What if they think I've abandoned them too?" she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. Mrs. Patel's expression softened. "They won't, because you'll come back." The decision tormented Jasmine. In the bathroom that night, she allowed herself 5 minutes of tears, then squared her shoulders and made the call, accepting the assignment. The mission was scheduled to depart in 3 days. Those 72 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jasmine created detailed schedules, prepared weeks of frozen meals, and recorded videos of herself reading bedtime stories. The morning of her departure, she held each daughter, memorizing their scents, their weight in her arms, the unique patterns of their movements. "I'll be back before you know it," she promised, though they couldn't understand the words. "Everything I do is for you 3. The airport farewell nearly broke her resolve. Madison, somehow sensing the significance of the moment, wailed inconsolably. Alexis clung to Jasmine's uniform with surprising strength. Only Zoe remained calm, her eyes tracking Jasmine's movements with an intensity that seemed too knowing for a 1-year-old. As the plane lifted from Boston, carrying her away from her daughters for the first time, Jasmine pressed her forehead against the window and allowed herself one final moment of doubt. Then, drawing a deep breath, she opened her briefing materials and began preparing for the mission ahead. Brussels presented challenges unlike any Jasmine had faced before. Among seasoned officers from 12 NATO countries, she was both the youngest and the only woman in her cohort. The tactical simulations were rigorous, designed to push participants to their limits under pressure. During the third day's crisis simulation, Jasmine's team faced a particularly complex scenario involving multiple hostile forces and limited resources. When conventional approaches failed, Jasmine proposed an unconventional solution, splitting their forces to create a diversion while the main objective was secured through an unexpected channel. "That's an enormous risk," argued a British major. "Dividing forces violates basic tactical doctrine." "Sometimes the textbook response is the most predictable one," Jasmine countered. "If we're facing an adversary who's studied the same manuals we have, we need to introduce unpredictability." Her approach was adopted reluctantly, then succeeded brilliantly. The observing commanders were impressed. "Where did that strategy come from, Lieutenant?" asked Brigadier General Walsh, the British commander overseeing the exercise. "When you care for triplets alone, sir, you learn to solve 3 problems simultaneously with limited resources," Jasmine replied. "Conventional approaches rarely work when you're outnumbered." Her honest answer earned appreciative laughter, but also newfound respect. By the mission's end, Jasmine had distinguished herself in every exercise, earning commendations from commanders of 3 different nations. Each night, she video-called Mrs. Patel, her heart aching at the sight of her growing daughters. During their last call, Mrs. Patel positioned the camera to show a surprising development. "They've been practicing while you were away," she said as Alexis pulled herself up on the coffee table, took 2 wobbly steps, then plopped down on her bottom. "They're walking?" Jasmine gasped, pressing her fingers to the screen as if she could reach through it. "Just starting to. They'll show you when you get home." The flight back to Boston felt interminable. Exhausted but exhilarated by her professional success, Jasmine's thoughts were consumed by what she had missed. First steps, a milestone moment she would never witness. When her taxi finally pulled up to Martha Washington House, Jasmine paid the driver with shaking hands and rushed inside. Mrs. Patel met her in the common room, the triplets playing on the floor nearby. "Welcome home, Lieutenant. You've been missed." Jasmine dropped her bag, kneeling on the floor. "Hi, my loves," she called softly. 3 small heads turned simultaneously. For a terrifying moment, Jasmine feared they might not recognize her after 2 weeks, a lifetime in a baby's experience. Then Alexis's face lit up with a radiant smile. She pulled herself to standing and took 3 tottering steps toward Jasmine before falling into her mother's arms. Zoe and Madison followed, each managing several steps before collapsing into the group embrace. Tears flowed freely down Jasmine's cheeks as she gathered her daughters close, breathing in their sweet scent. "You missed their first steps," Mrs. Patel said gently, "but you're here for these ones." That night, after the girls were finally asleep, Jasmine sat beside their cribs, watching their peaceful faces. The ache of having missed a milestone was real, but so was the pride in her professional accomplishment. Every sacrifice now was an investment in their future security. "Each sacrifice I make today is so you can run tomorrow," she promised softly, touching each small head in turn. "I will give you the world, even if I have to build it for you piece by piece." Holding her daughters as they took their first uncertain steps toward her, Jasmine had no idea that years later, that same determination would lead her to climb the Pentagon steps as the youngest colonel of her generation. Holding her daughters as they took their first uncertain steps toward her, Jasmine had no idea that years later, that same determination would lead her to climb the Pentagon steps as the youngest colonel of her generation. 5 years passed, like a whirlwind. Jasmine, now Captain Williams, stood before the imposing facade of the Pentagon, straightening her immaculate uniform before entering the building that housed the nerve center of American military might. The promotion to captain had come after her exemplary performance during a crisis simulation that had impressed several generals, followed by consistently outstanding evaluations. Today marked her first day in a strategic planning role that typically went to officers at least one rank above her. Her new office, though modest by Pentagon standards, represented a victory. A world map dominated one wall, colored pins marking regions of strategic interest. On her desk sat 3 framed photographs: Alexis in her school uniform, serious and poised; Zoe bent over a mathematics workbook, her expression one of intense concentration; and Madison, tools scattered around her, carefully dismantling an old radio. At 7 years old, the triplets were already showing distinct personalities and extraordinary abilities. "Captain Williams?" A lieutenant appeared at her door. "The briefing starts in 10 minutes. Colonel Patterson asked me to escort you." Jasmine nodded, gathering her materials. As she followed the lieutenant through the labyrinthine corridors, she noticed the sidelong glances from senior officers. Their expressions told a familiar story: skepticism, curiosity, and in some cases, thinly veiled resentment at her rapid advancement. The whispers followed her. "That's the single mother who somehow got here." The conference room fell into awkward silence as she entered. 8 men in uniform, all outranking her, turned to assess the newcomer. Colonel Patterson, now a senior strategist after his promotion from major, made the introductions. "Gentlemen, Captain Williams will be joining the Southeast Asia Strategic Assessment Team. Her analytical approach during the Bangkok crisis simulation was exceptional." A gray-haired general at the far end of the table frowned. "With all due respect, Colonel, we're discussing classified operations with long-term implications. Is a junior captain the appropriate addition?" "Captain Williams graduated top of her class at the Advanced Strategic Operations course," Patterson replied smoothly, "and she brings a perspective we've been lacking." The meeting proceeded with Jasmine speaking only when directly addressed, offering concise, insightful observations that gradually earned reluctant nods of approval. By the session's end, even the skeptical general was asking her opinion on force deployment strategies. That evening, Jasmine hurried from the Pentagon to the modest 2-bedroom apartment she'd finally been able to secure after her promotion. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who watched the girls after school, greeted her at the door. "They're doing homework," she whispered. "Very smart girls. No trouble at all." Jasmine found her daughters at the kitchen table, heads bent over their work. The sight never failed to fill her with fierce pride. 3 identical faces with her dark complexion and Marcus's amber eyes, focused with an intensity that reflected both parents' determination. "Mom!" Madison spotted her first, jumping up to hug her. The other 2 followed, creating a tangle of arms around Jasmine's waist. "How was the Pentagon?" Alexis asked, always interested in Jasmine's work. At 7, she already spoke about West Point as an inevitability rather than a possibility. "Intimidating but interesting," Jasmine answered honestly, setting her briefcase aside. "What did you learn today?" As the girls chattered about their day, Jasmine prepared a simple dinner, marveling at how articulate they had become. Zoe was already working on mathematics far beyond her grade level, while Madison described a science experiment with vocabulary that would challenge most adults. After dinner and homework review, the girls settled into their shared bedroom. Space was still at a premium despite Jasmine's promotion, while she tackled a mountain of briefing materials for the next day. Just as she finished, her phone buzzed with a school notification that made her heart sink. "Annual father-daughter breakfast next Friday," the cheerful message announced. "All dads invited to join their daughters for a special morning celebration." Jasmine set the phone down, dreading the conversations that would inevitably follow. The girls had asked about their father before, of course, but their questions had become more specific as they grew older and more aware of their peers' family structures. That night, as she tucked them into bed, Alexis broached the subject Jasmine had been anticipating. "Mom, the father-daughter breakfast is next week. Everyone's talking about it." Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, gathering her thoughts. "I know, sweetheart." "Why don't we have a dad like other kids?" Madison asked directly, always the one to confront difficult topics head-on. Jasmine looked at their three expectant faces and realized it was time for more honesty than she had previously offered. "Come sit with me," she said, moving to the small reading corner of their room. The girls arranged themselves around her. Alexis pressed against her right side, Zoe curled in her lap, Madison cross-legged on the floor facing her. "Your father's name is Marcus Fitzgerald," she began, the name feeling strange on her tongue after years of avoiding it. "We met when I was in school and he was finishing his business degree. We were together for 2 years." "What happened?" Zoe asked quietly. Jasmine chose her words carefully. "When I told him I was pregnant with you three, he wasn't ready to be a father. He chose a different path for his life." "Did he ever see us?" Alexis's question held a note of hope that broke Jasmine's heart. "No, sweetheart. He left before you were born." Madison, always the most pragmatic, looked up with clear eyes. "He didn't love us enough to stay?" The directness of the question struck Jasmine like a physical blow. She gathered Madison into her arms alongside the others. "Sometimes people make choices they later regret," she said finally. "He didn't know what amazing people you would become. One day he'll realize what he missed." "Is he still alive?" Zoe asked, the mathematician already piecing together timelines. "Yes, he works in finance in New York. He's quite successful in business." "Does he know we're triplets?" Alexis wondered. "I don't think so. We haven't had any contact since before you were born." The girls fell silent, processing this new information. Finally, Madison spoke again. "We don't need him. We have you." The simple declaration brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. "And I have you three. We're a team, remember?" Later, after the girls had fallen asleep, Jasmine sat at her small desk reviewing a classified assessment of insurgent activity in the Philippines. Her mind kept returning to the conversation about Marcus. She had protected the girls from the full truth, the cruelty of his dismissal, his characterization of her as a burden. Some wounds were still too raw to expose, even after 7 years. The next morning at the Pentagon, Jasmine presented her analysis of regional destabilization risks to a room full of senior officers. Her approach was unorthodox, challenging several long-held assumptions about local power structures. "This strategy assumes multiple simultaneous operations in disputed territories," General Harmon interrupted, his tone dismissive. "It would require coordination across 3 command structures. It's too complex to implement." Jasmine stood her ground. "With respect, sir, our conventional approach has yielded minimal progress for 3 years. Complexity can be an advantage if it disrupts enemy expectations." "This looks good on paper, Captain, but it won't work in the field," the general insisted. Before Jasmine could respond, alarms blared throughout the building. The simulation system monitoring an ongoing operation had detected critical failures in the command network. Officers rushed to terminals as screens displayed cascading system errors. "Primary command network down," a technician announced. "Backup systems failing to synchronize." Colonel Patterson turned to Jasmine. "Williams, you worked on the original architecture for this system during your Advanced Strategic Operations course, correct?" Jasmine nodded, already moving toward the main terminal. "Yes, sir. I can try to isolate the failure points." "Do it," he ordered, clearing space for her at the command console. For the next 17 minutes, Jasmine worked with methodical precision, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she bypassed failing systems and established alternative communication pathways. The room fell silent except for her occasional requests for specific data points. Rerouting through secondary nodes, she murmured, more to herself than the watching officers. Establishing manual override protocols. Gradually, the red warning indicators on the screens began shifting to amber, then green. Communication with field units restored. Data integrity maintained. System stabilized, Jasmine announced finally, straightening from the console. We should implement a full diagnostic, but immediate crisis functionality is restored. The assembled officers stared at her with new respect. General Harmon approached slowly. Where exactly did you learn to do that, Captain Williams? Jasmine met his gaze steadily. Creating 3 children alone, I learned that there is no problem without a solution, sir. Sometimes the conventional approach fails, and you have to improvise. The general studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I believe I owe your strategy proposal a second look, Captain. That evening, Jasmine returned home to find the girls experimenting with a small electronics kit Madison had received for her birthday. After dinner and bedtime stories, Jasmine settled on the couch with her laptop to catch up on news. A headline caught her eye. Marcus Fitzgerald named youngest CEO at Blackstone, reshaping investment strategy. The accompanying photograph showed Marcus in an exquisitely tailored suit standing confidently on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. His amber eyes, so like her daughter's, gleamed with triumph as he gestured toward electronic boards displaying market figures. Jasmine saved the article, adding it to a folder alongside the previous clipping. She studied his face, searching for traces of her daughter's in his features, the shape of Madison's determined chin, the slight arch of Alexis's eyebrows when concentrating, Zoe's thoughtful gaze. Continue climbing, Marcus, she whispered, closing the laptop. The fall will be more painful. While storing the clipping about Marcus's promotion, Jasmine couldn't predict that 7 years later she would be in the Oval Office, discussing national strategy with the president as her ex-boyfriend's financial empire began to crumble. While storing the clipping about Marcus's promotion, Jasmine couldn't predict that 7 years later she would be in the Oval Office, discussing national strategy with the president as her ex-boyfriend's financial empire began to crumble. 3 years passed in a blur of achievements and challenges. Jasmine, now Major Williams, stood in her kitchen watching her 10-year-old daughters prepare their backpacks for school. Each girl had developed her own distinct style despite their identical features. Alexis wore her hair in a practical ponytail, already dressed in the junior ROTC uniform she had proudly joined. Zoe's neat braids framed a face usually buried in advanced mathematics textbooks. Madison sported a short, practical cut that kept hair out of her eyes while she tinkered with electronics. Remember, you're staying with Lieutenant Cooper this time, Jasmine reminded them, checking her own deployment bag one final time. I'll call whenever possible, but communications might be limited. The girls nodded with the solemn understanding of military children who had grown accustomed to their mother's deployments. This assignment, however, was different, her first combat zone posting since their birth. How long will you be gone? Zoe asked, her analytical mind always seeking precise data. 3 months, if everything goes according to schedule, Jasmine answered, zipping her bag closed. Alexis straightened her shoulders in unconscious mimicry of her mother's military bearing. We'll be fine, Mom. We've prepared contingency plans. Madison looked up from the small circuit board she'd been adjusting. And I've modified your satellite phone to boost signal strength in remote areas. Jasmine smiled, overwhelmed by their competence and maturity. At 10, they ran the household with military efficiency during her absences, a necessity born from years of having only each other to rely on. I know you'll be fine, she said, gathering them into a group hug. You 3 are the strongest people I know. The next morning at Andrews Air Force Base, Jasmine boarded a military transport bound for the Middle East. Her assignment, developing counterinsurgency strategies for a region experiencing increased terrorist activity. As the aircraft lifted off, she opened her briefing materials, pushing aside the familiar ache of separation to focus on the mission ahead. The forward operating base in northern Iraq was a stark contrast to the Pentagon's air-conditioned offices. Sand infiltrated everything, temperatures soared to 110 degrees, and the constant distant thump of artillery served as a grim reminder of the region's volatility. Jasmine adapted quickly, earning respect from battle-hardened soldiers who initially regarded her with skepticism. 2 weeks into her deployment, Jasmine presented her counterinsurgency strategy to the regional command. Her approach was revolutionary. Rather than conventional force deployment, she proposed a network-based system that integrated local intelligence with rapid response teams. "With respect, Major," Colonel Davidson interrupted, pointing to the tactical map, "your strategy divides our forces into smaller units across a broader territory. It increases vulnerability." "Traditional thinking would suggest that, sir," Jasmine acknowledged, "but our current centralized approach has allowed insurgents to predict our movements. By creating a more adaptive network, we increase unpredictability while maintaining coordination." General Wallace, the theater commander, studied the proposal with narrowed eyes. "It's unconventional, but that might be exactly what we need. Previous approaches haven't yielded results." He looked around the table. "We'll implement Major Williams' strategy in Sector 4 as a pilot." Over the next month, Jasmine's strategy proved remarkably effective. Insurgent attacks decreased by 60% in the test sector, while intelligence gathering improved significantly. The success led to expanding the approach across the entire region, with Jasmine working 18-hour days to train teams and coordinate operations. During rare moments of downtime, she video-called her daughters, treasuring their excited updates about school projects and competitions. Alexis had won a regional debate championship. Zoe had been advanced 2 grade levels in mathematics. Madison had developed an algorithm that caught the attention of a visiting MIT professor. "We miss you, Mom," Madison said during one call, her sisters nodding in agreement. "But Lieutenant Cooper says you're saving lives over there." "I'm trying," Jasmine replied, not mentioning the close calls she'd experienced while visiting forward positions to evaluate her strategy's implementation. On her 73rd day in country, Jasmine was accompanying a tactical team to a village that had recently provided critical intelligence. They were returning from a successful meeting when the convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device. The explosion flipped the lead vehicle, sending shrapnel tearing through the convoy. Despite a painful wound to her shoulder, Jasmine took command, directing defensive positions and coordinating evacuation for the seriously injured. When insurgents opened fire from nearby buildings, she led the remaining able-bodied soldiers in a tactical retreat, carrying a wounded private across 200 meters of exposed terrain. Jasmine woke in a field hospital, the sharp smell of antiseptic replacing the acrid scent of explosives. A doctor was carefully removing shrapnel fragments from her shoulder. "Welcome back, Major," he said, noticing her open eyes. "You've got quite a collection of metal souvenirs here." "The rest of the team?" she asked, voice hoarse from the dust and smoke. "All alive thanks to your quick thinking. General Wallace is waiting to speak with you when you're stabilized." 2 hours later, heavily bandaged but insistent on sitting upright, Jasmine received the general in her hospital room. "That was impressive leadership under fire, Williams," he said without preamble. "Your actions saved that entire team." "Just doing my job, sir." "Most officers doing their job don't carry wounded men through active firefights." He placed a small box on her bedside table. "Silver Star for valor in combat. And this," he added another box beside it, "Purple Heart for wounds sustained. Both well-deserved." Before Jasmine could respond, the general continued. "There's also this." He handed her official-looking papers. "Transfer orders back to Walter Reed for recovery, then reassignment to Strategic Command in Washington. Your counterinsurgency framework is being implemented theater-wide. They want you at command to oversee the broader strategic integration." During her recovery at Walter Reed, Jasmine received a steady stream of visitors, generals, intelligence officers, even a deputy secretary of defense. Her innovative approach had caught attention at the highest levels of military leadership. Between debriefings and physical therapy, She spoke daily with her daughters, counting the days until reunion. What she hadn't expected was their surprise visit, organized by Lieutenant Cooper and escorted by a colonel who had served with Jasmine in Iraq. "Mom!" 3 voices called in unison as they burst into her hospital room, rushing to her bedside with a coordination that suggested extensive planning. Jasmine blinked back tears as she embraced them, careful of her bandaged shoulder. "How did you 3 manage this?" "Lieutenant Cooper arranged everything," Alexis explained. "We wanted to show you our projects in person." One by one, they presented their achievements. Alexis with her National Debate Championship trophy, Zoe with a mathematics medal for solving equations that challenged college students, Madison with pages of computer code that she had developed for artificial intelligence applications. The attending doctor, checking Jasmine's bandages later, shook his head in amazement. "I've never seen children so exceptional. They're extraordinary." Jasmine watched her daughters chatting animatedly with a visiting general who was quizzing them about their achievements. "They have my determination," she said quietly, "and their father's intelligence." "Speaking of exceptional," the doctor added, "General Blackwell is waiting outside, said something about a special assignment when you're recovered." General Blackwell, commander of Special Operations Strategic Development, didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Williams, we're creating a specialized task force for next-generation threat assessment. I want you leading it." Jasmine glanced at her daughters, who were listening with undisguised interest. "Sir, I'm honored, but I've been away from my family." "It's based in Washington," he interrupted, "and comes with promotion to lieutenant colonel. Your strategic innovation in Iraq saved lives and changed our operational paradigm. We need that thinking at headquarters." Later that evening, after the visitors had departed and the girls were asleep on cots arranged beside her hospital bed, Jasmine scrolled through military news on her tablet. A small item caught her eye. Fitzgerald Enterprises expanding into defense contracts. CEO cites strategic diversification. A photograph showed Marcus in an expensive suit, looking older but still unmistakably the man who had walked away 11 years earlier. She studied his face, noting the confidence that now read as arrogance, the ambition that had outweighed human connection. Then she looked at her sleeping daughters, his daughters too, though he had never claimed them, and felt a complex emotion that wasn't quite anger or resentment, but something closer to pity. Marcus had built an empire of money and influence, but had never known the fierce joy of watching Alexis win her first debate, or Zoe solve an impossible equation, or Madison build a computer from discarded parts. He had wealth that Jasmine would never possess, but she had riches he couldn't comprehend. The morning of her discharge from Walter Reed, Jasmine stood before the mirror in her hospital bathroom, examining her new scars. The physical therapist had warned that she might never regain full range of motion in her shoulder, a sobering reality for an active duty officer. But as she carefully donned her uniform, the newly added silver star gleaming alongside her other decorations, she felt a quiet pride in the journey that had brought her here. In the main room, she found her daughters already dressed and organized for departure. A nurse had brought breakfast, which they ate together while discussing plans for their return to Washington and the new assignment that awaited. "Lieutenant Colonel Williams," Alexis tested the new title, grinning. "It sounds perfect, Mom." As they prepared to leave, an orderly delivered a final envelope, official orders to report to the Pentagon in 3 weeks, following recovery leave. Inside was a personal note from General Blackwell. "The President has taken interest in your counterinsurgency framework. Expect briefings at the highest levels. Your star is rising, Williams." Jasmine folded the note carefully and tucked it into her pocket, then gathered her daughters and her few belongings. As they walked through the hospital corridors toward the waiting car, she couldn't help but think of the stark contrast between this moment and the lonely nights in Boston when she had wondered if she would survive as a single mother to triplets. "Ready for our next mission?" she asked the girls, who fell into step beside her with perfect synchronization. "Always ready, Mom," they responded in unison. three voices that had become her purpose, her strength, and her greatest achievement. While watching her daughters rush ahead to the car, Jasmine didn't know that 7 years later they would be at the center of attention in Washington, making a billionaire man tremble with their mere presence. While watching her daughters rush ahead to the car, Jasmine didn't know that in just 4 years they would be at the center of attention in Washington, making a billionaire man tremble with their mere presence. Washington, D.C., 2012. The Pentagon's imposing structure cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn as Colonel Jasmine Williams strode through the south entrance, her uniform crisp despite the early summer humidity. At 41, her face had acquired the subtle lines of command and responsibility, yet she moved with the energy of someone half her age. The silver oak leaves on her shoulders had been replaced by the eagle insignia of full colonel barely 18 months after her return from Iraq, a promotion rate that had raised eyebrows throughout the military establishment. Her office on the E-ring reflected her growing influence, spacious enough for a small conference table in addition to her desk, with windows overlooking the Potomac. The wall behind her desk displayed a world map dotted with colored pins representing operations she supervised, while her credenza held 3 framed photographs that remained constant despite the changing offices throughout her career. "Good morning, ma'am," her assistant greeted as she entered. "General Blackwell called. The Joint Chiefs want your assessment on the Caucasus situation by 1400 hours, and your daughter's school left a message. Something about special recognition at tomorrow's assembly." Jasmine nodded, already reviewing the files on her desk. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Please confirm my video call with the field commanders in Turkey, and I'll need the latest intelligence briefings before the JCS meeting." The morning passed in a blur of classified briefings, strategic assessments, and rapid-fire decisions that would affect military operations across 3 continents. Jasmine now commanded a critical division of special operations, with responsibility for developing and implementing counterterrorism strategies that had revolutionized American military doctrine. The frameworks she had pioneered in Iraq had been expanded and refined, earning her respect even from those who had initially dismissed her. At precisely 1200 hours, she paused to make a personal call. "Alexis, is everything all right at school?" she asked when her daughter answered. "Better than all right, Mom," Alexis replied, her voice carrying the confident tone she had inherited from Jasmine. "Madison's algorithm won the national AI competition. MIT wants to discuss a special development program with her." Pride surged through Jasmine. "That's incredible. Tell her I'll be home by 1800 hours to celebrate." And Zoe got early acceptance to the advanced mathematics program at Johns Hopkins for next semester. They're making an exception because she's only 12. 2 celebrations then. What about you? How did your West Point interview go? The admissions officer said my leadership record is exceptional for a candidate of any age. His exact words. Jasmine smiled, imagining Alexis's perfect posture during the interview. At 12, her eldest daughter by 7 minutes already carried herself with military bearing, her ambitions perfectly aligned with the path Jasmine had once fought so hard to pursue. "I'm proud of all 3 of you. We'll talk more tonight." After ending the call, Jasmine returned to her strategic assessment, but her thoughts occasionally drifted to her daughters. The triplets had blossomed into remarkable young women, each excelling in her chosen field with a determination that sometimes startled even their mother. They had inherited her resilience and focus, but their intellectual capabilities, Jasmine admitted to herself, clearly came from Marcus. It was the one gift he had given them, unknowingly and unwillingly. That evening, their modest but comfortable home in Arlington was filled with celebration. Jasmine had stopped on the way home to purchase 3 small gifts, wrapped in paper that matched each daughter's personality. Deep blue for strategic Alexis, emerald green for analytical Zoe, and bright red for innovative Madison. To the 3 most extraordinary 12-year-olds in the Western Hemisphere, Jasmine toasted, raising her glass of sparkling cider. Madison, Her short hair, now styled in a pixie cut that emphasized her expressive eyes, grinned. The Eastern Hemisphere didn't stand a chance either. The statistical probability of 3 genetically identical individuals achieving such diverse, exceptional outcomes is fascinating, Zoe observed, adjusting her glasses. Nature versus nurture in perfect experimental conditions. Alexis rolled her eyes fondly at her sister. Only you would turn our achievements into a scientific case study, Zoe. Their laughter filled the room, wrapping around Jasmine like a protective shield against the years of struggle and sacrifice. Moments like these made everything worthwhile. The sleepless nights, the missed school plays during deployments, the constant battle to prove herself in a system that had initially written her off as a military liability. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Jasmine sat at her home desk reviewing classified documents. Her secure phone buzzed with a priority message. Colonel Williams, please report to the Secretary of Defense's office at 0700 tomorrow. Classification level Umbra. Umbra, the highest security classification. Whatever the Secretary wanted, it was significant enough to bypass her immediate superiors. The next morning, Jasmine entered the Secretary's office precisely at 7 o'clock, finding not only Secretary Garrison but the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Director of National Intelligence waiting. Colonel Williams, the Secretary began without preamble. We've been reviewing your counterinsurgency frameworks and intelligence fusion protocols. The President has taken personal interest in your innovative approaches. The Director of National Intelligence nodded. Your integration of human intelligence with technological surveillance has transformed our capabilities in volatile regions. The White House is noticing. Thank you, sir. I've had exceptional teams implementing these strategies. The chairman studied her with evaluating eyes. There's talk of nominating you for Brigadier General, Colonel. It would make you one of the youngest generals in modern history and the first woman of color to reach that rank in Special Operations Command. Jasmine maintained her professional composure, but her pulse quickened. General, the rank that had seemed an impossible dream when she was a pregnant lieutenant being urged to resign her commission. The vetting process will be rigorous, warned the Secretary. Every aspect of your record will be scrutinized. Any vulnerabilities we should know about? Jasmine thought briefly of Marcus, of the triplets' questions about their father that had grown more sophisticated as they matured. Nothing that would compromise national security or my effectiveness, sir. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing sensitive operations and strategic priorities. As Jasmine departed, the Secretary's Chief of Staff handed her a folder. Preliminary paperwork for the nomination process. The President wants this moved quickly. That evening, Jasmine sat the girls down in their living room for a family meeting. They immediately sensed the importance from her expression. Is everything okay, Mom? Madison asked, her quick mind already calculating possibilities. Everything is excellent, Jasmine replied. I've been nominated for promotion to Brigadier General. 3 identical faces lit up with joy and pride. That's amazing, Alexis exclaimed. You'll be the youngest female general in the Army. The statistical aberration continues, Zoe noted with a smile. The probability of a single mother reaching flag rank is approximately 0.003%. Madison's analytical gaze sharpened. This will change things, won't it? More responsibility, more visibility. Jasmine nodded, impressed by their immediate grasp of the implications. Yes, there will be increased media attention, more scrutiny of our family, which is why I wanted to discuss something with you. She took a deep breath. Your father might become aware of you 3. The room fell silent. Though they had known about Marcus since they were 7, he remained an abstract concept, a genetic contributor rather than a presence in their lives. Will he try to contact us? Alexis asked, her protective instincts flaring. I don't know, Jasmine answered honestly. His company, Fitzgerald Enterprises, has expanded into defense contracting. Our paths might cross professionally. Madison's eyes narrowed. He abandoned us. He doesn't get to claim connection now that you're becoming a general. The timing would certainly suggest opportunistic motivation rather than genuine parental interest, Zoe observed clinically. Jasmine studied their faces, so like her own in determination, yet with Marcus's amber eyes and quick analytical minds. I want you to be prepared just in case, and to know that whatever happens, we're a team. The nomination process moved with unusual speed. By winter, congressional hearings were scheduled, background investigations completed, and endorsements secured from military leaders across multiple commands. Jasmine navigated the political aspects with the same strategic precision she applied to military operations, impressing senators from both parties with her command of complex security issues and innovative thinking. One evening in February, as snow fell gently outside their Arlington home, Jasmine was reviewing her testimony for the final confirmation hearing when Madison called from the living room. "Mom, you might want to see this." On the television screen, a financial news program featured a special segment. Marcus Fitzgerald transforms family business into global empire. The camera showed Marcus, now 44, addressing shareholders at the Fitzgerald Enterprises annual meeting. His tailored suit probably cost more than Jasmine's monthly salary, his confident stance communicating the ease of a man accustomed to power and deference. "Under my leadership," Marcus was saying, "Fitzgerald Enterprises has expanded beyond traditional investment banking into technology, defense, and global infrastructure. Our market capitalization has increased 400% in 6 years." The triplets watched with undisguised curiosity, studying the man whose DNA they carried but who had never acknowledged their existence. "He has your chin, Madison," Alexis observed. "And your analytical expression, Zoe," added Jasmine softly. Madison tilted her head. "He looks empty somehow, successful but hollow." The reporter's voice continued. "Fitzgerald's remarkable success has put him on the short list for Treasury Secretary in the next administration, according to Washington insiders. His recent expansion into defense technology has positioned the company as a key player in military modernization efforts." Jasmine switched off the television. "That's enough of that. We have more important things to focus on." 3 weeks later, Jasmine stood in her dress uniform before the Senate Armed Services Committee for her final confirmation hearing. The triplets sat in the front row, identical in their navy blue dresses, watching as their mother answered complex questions about national security with calm authority. When the committee chairman announced the unanimous vote to confirm her promotion, the girls broke into applause, their faces shining with pride. Photographers captured the moment, the newly confirmed brigadier general embracing her identical daughters, 4 extraordinary women against the backdrop of American flags. The next day's Washington Post featured the photograph prominently, with the headline, "History Made. Williams becomes youngest female general in Special Operations Command." The subheading read, "Single mother of triplets breaks barriers in military leadership." In his Manhattan office, Marcus Fitzgerald froze when his assistant placed the newspaper on his desk with the morning briefing. 3 young faces, identical to each other and hauntingly familiar to him, stared back from the photograph. Their eyes, his eyes, gazed proudly at the uniformed woman whose career he had once dismissed as insignificant. While arranging the photographs from the ceremony on her new office wall, Jasmine didn't know that in just 3 years, fate would orchestrate such a public and devastating encounter that it would shake the very foundations of the Fitzgerald Empire. While arranging the photographs from the ceremony on her new office wall, Jasmine didn't know that in just 3 years, fate would orchestrate such a public and devastating encounter that it would shake the very foundations of the Fitzgerald Empire. Washington, D.C., 2026. The early morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jasmine's spacious Pentagon office, casting a golden glow across the polished surface of her desk. The nameplate gleamed, General Jasmine Williams Carter, a reminder of both her remarkable military ascent and her marriage 2 years prior to Dr. Robert Carter, a trauma surgeon who had treated her in Iraq and re-entered her life at a military hospital fundraiser. The marriage had added stability to their family unit, though the triplets, now 14 and fiercely independent, still referred to themselves as the Williams sisters, with pride. Jasmine's phone rang, interrupting her review of classified intelligence reports from Eastern Europe. The secure line connected directly to the Secretary of Defense's office. "General Williams Carter," she answered crisply. "Jasmine, it's official." Secretary Harrison's voice carried unmistakable satisfaction. "The Senate unanimously confirmed your promotion. You are now officially the youngest four-star general in modern American history and the first woman of color to reach this rank in Special Operations Command." Jasmine closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment to absorb the magnitude of the achievement. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor to serve. The President specifically requested your presence at the ceremony next week. The Willard Intercontinental has been secured. Full military honors, media presence, the works. This is historic, Jasmine." After ending the call, Jasmine sat motionless, her mind traveling back to that rain-soaked Boston apartment and Marcus's cutting words. "You're a military officer with a modest paycheck and outsized ambitions." The memory no longer stung. Instead, it fueled a quiet satisfaction. She opened her drawer and glanced at the folder containing newspaper clippings about Marcus, a habit she had maintained over the years, less from bitterness than as a reminder of how far she had come. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Alexis. "Did you hear yet?" Jasmine smiled and initiated a video call. 3 identical faces appeared on screen, crowded together in the library of their high school. "It's official," Jasmine announced simply. Their synchronized cheers drew disapproving looks from nearby students, but the triplets were too excited to care. "We need to pick out dresses for the ceremony," Madison declared. "Something coordinated but not identical." "White," Alexis suggested immediately. "Clean, symbolic, distinctive against all the military uniforms." "The visual impact would be striking," Zoe agreed, her analytical mind already calculating the effect. 3 identical figures in white surrounding Mom in full dress uniform. Jasmine laughed. "You 3 have already planned this out, haven't you?" "We've maintained contingency wardrobes for various ceremonial scenarios since your promotion to Brigadier General," Madison admitted without a trace of irony. "Efficiency is key." That evening, the family gathered in their Arlington home for an impromptu celebration. Robert, still in his surgical scrubs after a long shift at Walter Reed, raised a glass of champagne. "To the most extraordinary woman I've ever known," he toasted. "You rewrote the rules of what's possible." The triplets raised their sparkling cider glasses in unison. At 14, they had blossomed into poised young women, each developing her unique strengths while maintaining the uncanny connection they had shared since birth. "To Mom," Alexis began, "who showed us that determination. Intelligence," Zoe continued. "And courage," Madison added. "Can overcome any obstacle." They finished together. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Robert found Jasmine in her home office, staring at her computer screen. "What's so fascinating at this hour?" he asked, massaging her shoulders. She turned the screen toward him, revealing an article about Fitzgerald Enterprises' recent expansion into advanced military technology. Marcus's face stared back from the photograph, older but still handsome, addressing shareholders about record profits. "He'll be there," Jasmine said quietly. "The Willard ceremony. Fitzgerald Enterprises just secured a $2 billion defense contract. As CEO, he'll be on the invitation list." Robert studied her face. "Does that bother you?" "No," she answered truthfully. "But it might be the first time he sees the girls." The next week passed in a flurry of preparations. The ceremony at the Willard Intercontinental was shaping up to be one of the most prestigious military events of the year. The guest list included the President, Joint Chiefs of Staff, congressional leaders, and CEOs of major defense contractors, including, as Jasmine had predicted, Marcus Fitzgerald. The evening before the ceremony, Jasmine stood in her bedroom inspecting her formal dress uniform. Every ribbon and medal had been meticulously arranged, each representing battles fought and won, both on foreign soil and within the military establishment itself. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Madison entered, holding a small velvet box. "We wanted to add something," she said, opening the box to reveal a custom-designed pin featuring 3 small stars arranged in a triangle. "One star for each of us, to remember what you fought for." Jasmine felt her throat tighten as she took the pin. "It's perfect." "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Madison asked, perceptive as always. "Not about the ceremony," Jasmine admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But he'll be there." Madison didn't need clarification. "You mean our biological father?" Jasmine nodded. "It will be the first time he sees you 3. Do you think he'll recognize us?" Madison's question held curiosity rather than longing. "Impossible not to. You have his eyes." Madison was quiet for a moment, then asked the question Jasmine had been expecting for years. "Do you think he ever regretted leaving?" Jasmine considered carefully before answering. "I think Marcus Fitzgerald regrets very little in life. Success has reinforced his belief that every decision he made was correct. Even abandoning his children? Especially that. In his mind, you 3 would have been obstacles to his ambition." Jasmine stroked Madison's hair gently. "Instead, you became the foundation of my success." The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright. The Willard Intercontinental's grand ballroom had been transformed with military precision. Flags of all service branches flanked the stage, seating arranged by rank and importance, security personnel strategically positioned throughout. In a private suite upstairs, Jasmine watched as her daughters helped each other with final adjustments to their identical white dresses, custom designed to complement her formal uniform. The sight of them, poised, brilliant, and stronger than she could have imagined that rainy night in Boston, filled her with a fierce pride that transcended any military honor. "Ready?" Robert asked, handsome in his dark suit with military honors from his own service as an army surgeon. "More than ready," Jasmine replied, adjusting the special pin on her uniform. Across the hotel, in the executive bar, Marcus Fitzgerald sipped an 18-year-old scotch, reviewing notes for potential conversations with Pentagon officials. At 44, he had achieved everything he had mapped out in his Harvard days. Fitzgerald Enterprises now employed over 15,000 people globally, with market capitalization exceeding $30 billion. His recent pivot into defense technology had positioned the company for decades of lucrative government contracts. "Mr. Fitzgerald?" His assistant appeared discreetly at his elbow. "They're beginning to seat guests for the ceremony." Marcus nodded, straightening his bespoke Tom Ford suit. "Any word on my meeting request with General Sullivan from procurement?" "Scheduled for tomorrow morning, sir. Today is primarily ceremonial." Marcus followed his assistant into the grand ballroom, noting with satisfaction his placement at a table near the front, recognition of his company's growing importance to national defense. He exchanged polite greetings with cabinet secretaries and fellow CEOs, his practiced charm earning smiles and business cards. "Quite the historic occasion," remarked the woman seated beside him, the CEO of a major aerospace corporation. "General Williams Carter has revolutionized special operations doctrine. My engineers can barely keep up with her strategic innovations." Marcus nodded as if familiar with the general's work, though in truth he had paid little attention to military promotions until his company's expansion into defense contracting. The name Williams had registered vaguely when he reviewed the invitation, but in the whirlwind of international business, he hadn't made the connection to the young lieutenant he had left behind 15 years ago. The ceremony began with military precision. Distinguished guests were announced. The Secretary of Defense gave opening remarks about the historic nature of the promotion, and a video presentation highlighted General Williams Carter's extraordinary career trajectory and innovations. As images of desert operations and Pentagon briefings flashed across the screen, Marcus felt an odd sense of familiarity. Something about the poised, authoritative woman in combat fatigues nagged at his memory, but he couldn't place it. Then the master of ceremonies made the announcement, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the newest four-star general in the United States Armed Forces, General Jasmine Williams Carter." The double doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Marcus turned with the rest of the audience, then froze, his scotch halfway to his lips. Jasmine entered in perfect military stride, her uniform adorned with medals that spoke of valor and strategic brilliance. But it was the three young women in identical white dresses who flanked her that caused the blood to drain from Marcus's face. 3 14-year-old girls, identical in feature, with dark complexions that matched Jasmine's and amber eyes that were unmistakably his own. The recognition hit him with physical force, nearly causing him to drop his glass. Triplets. Jasmine had been carrying triplets when he walked away. As Jasmine made her way to the stage, accepting handshakes and salutes, Marcus remained paralyzed in his seat. The girls, his daughters, moved with their mother's quiet confidence, their expressions revealing intelligence and poise beyond their years. The Secretary of Defense began the formal promotion ceremony, but Marcus heard nothing. His mind raced through calculations. 14 years since he had walked out of that Boston apartment, leaving behind a pregnant Jasmine with the dismissive certainty that she would never amount to anything significant. Now she stood on stage receiving the 4th star of a full general, surrounded by 3 extraordinary daughters he had never known existed. Jasmine's voice, strong and clear, carried throughout the ballroom as she took the oath of office. Her eyes swept the audience during her acceptance speech, and for a brief, electric moment, they locked with Marcus's. No recognition flickered in her gaze, just the confident assessment of a military leader acknowledging distinguished guests. It was in that moment that Marcus realized the magnitude of what he had thrown away. Not just a family, but this family. These remarkable young women who were now at the center of Washington's attention, and the extraordinary mother who had raised them alone while ascending to one of the most powerful military positions in the world. As the ceremony concluded and the reception began, Marcus watched in growing desperation as Jasmine was surrounded by admirers, generals, politicians, and business leaders who treated her with genuine respect and admiration. The triplets remained by her side, engaging confidently with dignitaries who seemed impressed by their precocious intelligence. While observing this family from across the ballroom, Marcus had no way of knowing that his careful approach toward the exit would be intercepted, forcing a confrontation that would forever alter the empire he had built at the cost of the family he never knew. While observing this family from across the ballroom, Marcus had no way of knowing that his careful approach toward the exit would be intercepted, forcing a confrontation that would forever alter the empire he had built at the cost of the family he never knew. The grand ballroom of the Willard Intercontinental glittered with military decorations and political power. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathering of America's defense establishment. Generals with chests heavy with medals, politicians in conservative suits, and corporate leaders whose companies furnished the weapons of American might. Champagne flowed as freely as the congratulations directed toward the woman of the hour. Marcus Fitzgerald adjusted his Hermes tie, his fingers trembling slightly against the silk as he calculated the shortest path to the exit. His usual confidence had abandoned him, replaced by a churning anxiety he hadn't felt since his earliest days on Wall Street. The room suddenly seemed too warm, too crowded, too dangerous. "Another scotch, Mr. Fitzgerald?" A waiter appeared at his elbow. "No, I need to leave," Marcus muttered, handing over his barely touched glass. "Early meeting tomorrow." He began moving toward the door with measured steps, careful not to draw attention. His gaze remained fixed on Jasmine and the triplets, who stood surrounded by admirers near the center of the room. The president himself had just finished congratulating the new 4-star general, his hand placed respectfully on her shoulder as flashbulbs captured the historic moment. Those girls, His daughters. The revelation hammered at him with each heartbeat. Their faces, so clearly carrying his features blended with Jasmine's, represented the most profound consequence of his callous decision 15 years ago. He had dismissed Jasmine's pregnancy as an inconvenience, a distraction from his ambitions. Now, the full magnitude of what he had abandoned confronted him in triplicate. Marcus was within 20 feet of the exit when he heard it, a voice cutting through the ambient noise of the reception. "Mr. Fitzgerald? Leaving so soon?" He froze, then slowly turned. Standing before him were three identical young women in white dresses, studying him with analytical precision. Their amber eyes, unmistakably his own, contained a mixture of curiosity and something harder, more evaluative. Yes, I have an early meeting," he stammered, shocked at being addressed directly. How did they know who he was? Had Jasmine pointed him out? The tallest of the three, by perhaps half an inch, stepped forward slightly. "I'm Alexis Williams. These are my sisters, Zoe and Madison." Marcus swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "It's nice to meet you." "Is it?" asked the one identified as Madison, her head tilted slightly in assessment. "You were leaving rather quickly for someone attending a historic military ceremony." "We noticed you watching us," Zoe added, her gaze methodically cataloging his reactions. "Statistical analysis of your eye movements and physiological responses suggested significant emotional distress." Marcus felt cornered, outmaneuvered by teenagers who somehow radiated both youthful energy and disconcerting maturity. "You're very observant." "West Point application training," Alexis replied with a slight shrug. "Situational awareness is essential for military leadership. And pattern recognition algorithms are my specialty," Madison added. "Your facial structure matches ours by approximately 78%. Marcus's heart pounded against his ribs. They knew. Somehow they had identified him without introduction. Before he could formulate a response, a fourth voice joined the conversation, deeper, authoritative, and instantly recognizable. "I see you've met my daughters, Mr. Fitzgerald." Jasmine approached with measured steps, her uniform immaculate, 4 stars gleaming on each shoulder. Her expression revealed nothing. No anger, no triumph, no recognition of their shared history, only the calm assessment of a military commander evaluating a tactical situation. "General Williams Carter," Marcus managed, falling back on formality as a shield. "Congratulations on your promotion." "Thank you." Her voice was controlled, professional. No hint of the young lieutenant who had once shared his bed, his dreams, his future, until those dreams had required her sacrifice. "Your daughters are remarkable," he said, searching for something, anything to say that wouldn't reveal the chaos in his mind. "They are," Jasmine agreed, resting her hands lightly on Madison and Alexis's shoulders. "Alexis has already been pre-accepted to West Point. Zoe just completed a mathematics fellowship normally reserved for graduate students. And Madison's artificial intelligence research has attracted attention from DARPA. Each achievement landed like a physical blow. These extraordinary young women carried his DNA, yet he had contributed nothing to their development, their success, their brilliance. They were living refutations of his dismissal of Jasmine's potential. "It appears you've done an exemplary job raising them," Marcus said, struggling to maintain his composure. A flash of something, perhaps amusement, crossed Jasmine's face. "Parenting seems to come naturally to some people, Mr. Fitzgerald. To others, it represents an inconvenient obstacle to personal ambition." The subtle jab found its mark. Marcus felt a flush creeping up his neck as he recognized his own cruel words from 15 years ago reflected back at him. The triplets watched this exchange with keen interest, their identical faces revealing different reactions. Alexis's protective alertness, Zoe's analytical assessment, Madison's barely contained intensity. "You seem surprised to see us all together," Madison observed, her direct gaze unsettlingly similar to the one Marcus saw in his own mirror each morning. "Did you not expect to encounter us at your mother's ceremony?" The deliberate error hung in the air between them. Marcus looked at Jasmine, whose expression remained neutral. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," he began carefully. "Has there?" Alexis interrupted, her posture straightening almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps you should clarify exactly who you are, Mr. Fitzgerald." The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken history. The ambient noise of the reception seemed to fade as Marcus realized he stood at a crossroads. Denial would be futile. Their appearance alone made the truth evident to anyone with eyes. "I knew your mother many years ago," he admitted, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. Something shifted in the triplets' expressions, a collective recognition that transformed their curious assessment into something cooler, more evaluative. "You're the man who said she would never be anything but a burden," Madison stated flatly, her analytical tone making the accusation even more damning. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Jasmine had told them his exact words, his cruelest moment, preserved and passed down to the daughters he had never known. "That was," he began, but words failed him. What could he possibly say? That he had been young, frightened, selfish beyond measure? "A significant miscalculation," Zoe finished for him, her mathematical mind framing his moral failure in terms of statistical error. "Perhaps the most consequential predictive failure in your otherwise successful career." Before Marcus could respond, the crowd around them shifted as an imposing figure approached, the Secretary of Defense, flanked by two aides. "General Williams Carter," the secretary said warmly, "we need you for the official photographs. The president is waiting, and these extraordinary daughters of yours should be included." He turned, noticing Marcus. "Ah, Mr. Fitzgerald. I understand your company's new cybersecurity division has made significant advances. We should discuss that at another time." "Of course, Mr. Secretary," Marcus replied automatically, years of corporate networking taking over despite his internal turmoil. "If you'll excuse us, Mr. Fitzgerald," Jasmine said with perfect professional courtesy. "Duty calls." The words, so ordinary, yet so pointed in context, landed with precision. Duty. The concept that had defined her life and shaped her daughters, while he had pursued only ambition and wealth. "Of course, General," Marcus responded, watching as Jasmine and the triplets were escorted toward the stage where the president waited. Each step they took seemed to widen the gulf between them, between the family they had become without him and the man who had chosen to walk away. As Marcus stood alone in the crowded ballroom, he felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to follow them, to demand a private conversation with Jasmine, to somehow insert himself into the narrative of their lives. He took 2 steps in their direction before his path was blocked by a pair of senior military officers. "Mr. Fitzgerald," one of them said pleasantly but firmly, "I believe your seating area is this way." He gestured toward the corporate section, away from the inner circle where Jasmine now stood with the president. "I need to speak with General Williams Carter," Marcus insisted, the desperation in his voice surprising even himself. "The general is occupied with official duties at present," the officer replied, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Perhaps another time." Marcus recognized the gentle but unmistakable boundary being established. Whether by coincidence or design, he was being kept at a distance from Jasmine and the girls. The realization stung more than he would have expected. He, Marcus Fitzgerald, CEO of a global enterprise, worth billions on paper, was being politely but firmly redirected like an unwelcome intruder. For the next hour, Marcus remained at the reception, nursing a scotch he barely tasted, watching from a distance as Jasmine moved through the gathering with natural authority. The triplets stayed close to her, engaging confidently with senators, generals, and foreign dignitaries who seemed genuinely impressed by their poise and intelligence. They were celebrities in their own right, the remarkable daughters of a groundbreaking military leader. Their matching white dresses stood out among the sea of uniforms and dark suits, drawing attention and admiration wherever they moved. What struck Marcus most painfully was the easy affection between them. The small touches, the private smiles, the synchronized movements that spoke of a lifetime of connection. They functioned as a unit, these four women, bound by shared experience and mutual respect. A family, complete and whole without him. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself increasingly invisible, a corporate figure of moderate importance at an event celebrating military excellence. No one sought his opinion or his company. The defense contracts that had seemed so significant when he entered the ballroom now felt hollow, mere business transactions rather than meaningful contributions. When he finally left the reception, slipping out during a musical interlude, Marcus caught one final glimpse of Jasmine and the Triplets. They stood together near the stage, laughing at something the Secretary of Defense had said, their faces illuminated with genuine joy. In that moment, they were incandescent, four brilliant stars in their own universe, shining without any need for his light. As the doors of the Willard closed behind him, Marcus knew with crushing certainty that the confrontation in the ballroom had been merely a prelude. The real reckoning was yet to come, and when it did, the carefully constructed empire that had once seemed worth any sacrifice would offer little protection against the truth reflected in his daughter's amber eyes. While the elegant crowd inside celebrated a historic military achievement, observers could not have predicted that the real confrontation would unfold on the hotel's moonlit veranda, where words spoken 15 years ago would return with the force of precision-guided munitions. While the elegant crowd inside celebrated a historic military achievement, observers could not have predicted that the real confrontation would unfold on the hotel's moonlit veranda, where words spoken 15 years ago would return with the force of precision-guided munitions. 2 hours after the main ceremony had concluded, the Willards' grand ballroom had thinned considerably. Distinguished guests departed in waves, leaving behind the core celebration of military leadership and close associates. Marcus had retreated to the hotel bar, ordering his third scotch while obsessively checking his phone, a pretense of important business masking his turmoil. The amber liquid in his glass matched the eyes of the three girls who had ambushed him earlier, his eyes staring back at him from faces that carried unmistakable echoes of his own. The revelation had shattered his carefully constructed reality. Triplets. Three remarkable young women he had dismissed before they even existed. "Another, sir?" The bartender gestured toward his empty glass. "Yes." "No," Marcus corrected himself, suddenly aware of the slight slurring in his voice. He needed clarity, not numbness. Just the check. He paid and walked unsteadily toward the lobby, his mind racing. The rational, calculating part of his brain, the part that had built Fitzgerald Enterprises into a global powerhouse, insisted he should leave immediately, contact his legal team, prepare for potential complications. But something deeper, perhaps the last remnant of the young man who had once loved Jasmine Williams, propelled him toward the terrace doors instead. The night air hit him with sobering coolness as he stepped onto the veranda. Washington's monuments glowed in the distance, marble sentinels watching over the Capitol. Marcus loosened his tie, inhaling deeply, trying to steady himself before returning to his hotel across town. "Mr. Fitzgerald, that was quite a hasty exit for someone who champions strategic patience in his corporate philosophy." The voice froze him mid-step. Jasmine stood at the far end of the terrace, her uniform still immaculate despite the long evening. She had removed her formal cap, allowing her hair, now styled in an elegant twist with touches of distinguished gray at the temples, to frame her face. The face that had once looked at him with love, then devastation, now regarded him with composed neutrality. "I needed some air," he managed, his usual eloquence deserting him. "Understandable. It can be overwhelming to confront the consequences of our choices." She remained perfectly still, maintaining a strategic distance between them. Marcus's corporate instincts kicked in, seeking neutral ground. Your promotion is well-deserved. Your career has been impressive. Thank you." Her voice revealed nothing, though according to your assessment 15 years ago, I was destined for insignificance. The direct reference to that rainy night in Boston caught him off guard. "Jasmine, about what happened?" "General Williams Carter," she corrected mildly. "We're hardly on first-name terms, Mr. Fitzgerald." The formality stung more than he expected. Marcus took a step toward her, then stopped as she subtly straightened her posture, a military commander establishing boundaries. "We need to talk," he insisted, his voice mixing desperation with his habitual authority. "Those girls, they're my daughters too." A flicker of something, perhaps amusement, crossed Jasmine's face. "Are they?" "Biologically, yes, but in all ways that matter, they're mine alone." "I have rights," Marcus argued, his voice rising slightly. He moved closer, emboldened by alcohol and the urge to reclaim something he hadn't known he'd lost. "I can offer them opportunities, connections, a place in my world." "Your rights?" Jasmine's voice remained quiet, but took on an edge sharp enough to cut steel. "Rights are accompanied by responsibilities, Marcus. Responsibilities you explicitly rejected 15 years ago." Before Marcus could respond, the terrace doors opened. The triplets emerged, still in their white dresses, now draped with elegant shawls against the evening chill. They moved with synchronized grace to stand slightly behind their mother, a unified front. "Everything okay, Mom?" Alexis asked, her protective instinct evident in her stance. "Perfectly fine," Jasmine assured her. Mr. Fitzgerald was just expressing his sudden interest in parental rights. Three identical expressions of cool assessment turned toward Marcus. The collective weight of their evaluation made him fidget. He, who stared down corporate boards and government regulators without blinking. "We'd like to understand your reasoning," Alexis said, her tone suggesting a cross-examination rather than a family reunion. Marcus swallowed, unprepared for their direct engagement. I was young when your mother told me about her pregnancy. Scared. My career was just beginning." "You were 26, Zoe corrected precisely, "with an MBA from Harvard and a position at Blackstone secured. Hardly an adolescent making minimum wage." Her factual dissection of his excuse made Marcus wince. "It was complicated. It was a binary choice," Madison interrupted, her analytical mind cutting to the core. "Stay and support your family or leave to advance your career. You chose the latter." "I've changed," Marcus insisted, sensing the conversation slipping beyond his control. "I have resources now. I can open doors for you that—" "Harvard has already opened their doors for me," Zoe interjected calmly. "Their mathematics department created a special accelerated program. And West Point's admission committee was quite impressed with my leadership portfolio," Alexis added, standing slightly taller. "MIT is funding my artificial intelligence research." Madison completed the trinity of achievements. "The doors seem to be opening just fine without your assistance." Each statement landed like a precisely targeted strike, dismantling his assumption that his wealth and connections would be irresistible. These girls, his daughters, had already secured paths to institutions he had once seen as stepping stones to success. "I want to be part of your lives," Marcus said, a note of genuine pleading entering his voice for perhaps the first time in decades. "To get to know you." "Why now?" Jasmine asked, the question hanging in the night air. "Is it because you've suddenly discovered paternal instinct? Or because your company's cybersecurity division is bidding on contracts that will ultimately require my department's approval?" The accuracy of her assessment stunned Marcus into momentary silence. Fitzgerald Enterprises' recent pivot into military technology indeed placed him in a position where Jasmine's goodwill could be valuable. He hadn't consciously made the connection, but the implication that his interest might be strategic rather than genuine stung with the particular pain of truth. "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "Perhaps not," Jasmine conceded. but neither was telling a pregnant woman that she was insignificant and would never amount to anything beyond a burden. The triplets' expressions shifted subtly at this revelation, a detail of their origin story they hadn't previously heard. Madison's analytical gaze hardened, Zoe's eyes widened slightly in calculation, and Alexis's jaw set in a manner disturbingly similar to Marcus's own expression when confronting opposition. "You said that to our mother?" Alexis asked, her voice quiet but dangerous. Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. It was a difficult moment. "I said things I didn't mean." "I think you meant them precisely," Jasmine interrupted with calm certainty. "You believed every word. You were simply wrong." Before Marcus could formulate a response, the terrace doors opened again. The Secretary of Defense emerged, his expression solemn as he approached their group. "General Williams Carter, I hate to interrupt, but I need to discuss your nomination for the Cybersecurity Task Force. The President considers it crucial to have someone with your unique experience in command." A flash of triumph crossed Jasmine's face so quickly that Marcus might have imagined it. The Cybersecurity Task Force, the very initiative his company had been positioning to capture significant contracts from. "Of course, Mr. Secretary," Jasmine replied smoothly. "My daughters and I were just concluding our conversation with Mr. Fitzgerald." The secretary nodded politely to Marcus before turning back to Jasmine. "The President is quite impressed with your integrated approach, says it's exactly the fresh thinking we need in this space." Marcus watched as respect and deference flowed toward Jasmine. The woman he had dismissed as inconsequential now commanded the attention of the nation's most powerful figures. Her career trajectory had placed her at the nexus of decisions that would affect national security and, incidentally, the profitability of his recent business ventures. "You know, Marcus," Jasmine said quietly as she prepared to follow the secretary, "you were right about one thing. I really wasn't enough for you." A serene smile touched her lips as her daughters gathered protectively around her. "I was much more." The four women turned as one, following the secretary back toward the ballroom doors. Through the glass, Marcus could see them being welcomed warmly into the inner circle of Washington power, not as wives or daughters of important men, but as leaders and innovators in their own right. He remained alone on the terrace, the cool night air offering no comfort against the burning realization of what he had discarded. His empire of Wall Street investments, private jets, and Fifth Avenue penthouses couldn't purchase back the family that might have been his, or the respect in his daughter's eyes, or the years of watching them grow. When his assistant found him still standing there 20 minutes later, Marcus was staring at the space where Jasmine had stood, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Is everything all right, Mr. Fitzgerald?" she asked, noting his disheveled appearance. "The car is waiting to take you to the morning board meeting." Marcus looked one last time toward the ballroom where Jasmine was now receiving congratulations from the president, then turned away, knowing he left behind much more than just a reception. "No," he answered honestly, "but she is." If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.